Let's go across to Aaron Maté, who is with The Nation. He's also got his own show, which you can see on the internet. I'll give you the addresses for all of that in a couple of minutes' time. He's a man who is also involved in plenty of investigative journalism, independent journalism out of the States as well. And Aaron joins us now. Aaron, good evening, mate, or good morning, of course, your time. Welcome to Australia.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to ask a few things, because one thing that you've very much focused on is the Mueller report, a lot of the nonsense in and around the Mueller report, a lot of the misbelievings of what the Mueller report was. Yet, how do you feel about the parts and flanks in the US media? I'm talking about your MSNBCs, etc., CNN, who still want to talk about the Mueller report as if it is some sort of active roadmap to the inevitable impeachment of a president who was never worthy.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most embarrassing media episodes in U.S. history. For over 2+ years, major networks like MSNBC and CNN and other outlets were convinced and promoted this notion that Donald Trump was a conspirator or asset of the Russian government. And it was moronic. It was a farce. They did this by basically ignoring all the countervailing evidence that undermined their conspiracy theory. And they hyped up a lot of ultimately inconsequential details and selectively presented information to promote a false portrayal and to give people the impression that there was something actually there when there actually wasn't. And it's amazing that even when it comes crashing down, Robert Mueller finishes his investigation, doesn't indict anybody for a conspiracy, releases a report that finds no conspiracy. And then Mueller has this testimony about a month ago that was really embarrassing, because it showed that Mueller himself seemed to be unaware of critical details of his own investigation. None of that does anything to put a dent in this narrative that they've built up. So there's been no accountability, no self-reflection, and we're not seeing as much talk about the Mueller investigation as we used to. For 2+ years, it dominated the news cycle. Now it's kind of died down because it's impossible to sustain this fantasy anymore. But there's still flickers of it, and there's still any lack of any kind of minimal accountability.
But also, I mean, the truth that's very difficult for a country like Australia to necessarily understand is that when you've got a country of 300 million people, when you had 120 million people vote in a presidential election, there's 60 million people that are happy and there's 60 million people that are unhappy, which means there's one hell of a business model in playing to either side of that. So we know where Fox sits, we know where conservative media sits, and they, of course, get harangued for choosing one side of the fence. But let's be honest too, it is the business model of left-wing media to play to the 60 million who need to believe that there is a great untruth at the heart of the 2016 election, that there is a great inevitability of that truth being put right in 2020. So this is what I find amazing, is that in many ways, even the media that used to pretend that it was centrist in the United States has actually woken up to the fact that what Fox accused them of being for all those years, either they weren't and they have now become, or they always were and now they have to own it.
Well, I think there's some truth to what you're saying. I would, though, extend it to all sides, because for many years, Fox News pushed a belief that Barack Obama was secretly a Muslim and born in Kenya. And that was a dominant topic on Fox News for many years. And you have other topics where this applies as well. On Fox News right now, there's a huge, I think, demonization of immigrants and an effort to portray them as a threat to the U.S. and someone that takes away U.S. jobs, instead of, I think, looking at the real sources of wage inequality and of a weak economy, which to me is the corporate interests that actually manage the economy. So I think you're correct in highlighting that there was a business model here and a business interest in hyping up this Russia collusion thing for ratings on the part of CNN and MSNBC, and playing to people's fears of Trump and exploiting that and giving them this fake narrative that Trump is a Russian agent and that Robert Mueller is going to discover it and everything's going to go back to normal. But I just think that this applies to all sides.
Oh, no, absolutely. And the same with the Benghazi obsessions. The obsessions have absolutely existed on the right. I'm just saying that for once we've actually seen it in absolute clarity happening on on, for want of a better term, the other side. But whataboutism, it goes on all day, all over the world. I did want to ask you one final question about the media climate as somebody who is seemingly happily sitting outside of it, independent from it, able to push back against it. How do you see the way that the media is dealing with the process around a presidential election heading into 2020? Because we know that there are people with not a snowflake's chance of hell of trying to primary out the president, Joe Walsh, but because, of course, he's a former Republican who'll bag the current president, he does the tour of all of the Sunday shows, the big high-profile political shows. Then conversely, any sort of debate from, say, the Democrats getting ready is big business. But did I see a thing today that CNN is about to do, 40 minutes per candidate about climate change, which means there'll be the best part of, a 10.5-hour extravaganza over multiple days. As somebody who sits out and has seen how it's been done well and poorly, this sort of orgy of candidate exposure or candidate discussion, does it help or hurt the process?
Well, it depends. I do think that when you have a lot of candidates, especially on the Democratic side, you have more of an opportunity to talk about the issues. In previous Democratic Party races, the spectrum of opinion was not that wide, with some exceptions. Bernie Sanders obviously brought a different way of thinking than the other establishment Democrats in 2016. And we're seeing that now. You have Elizabeth Warren and Tulsi Gabbard, who also, I think outside of the conventional Democratic Party box. But yeah, it does risk being overkill with, we had these debates where you have 2 nights of 10 candidates each. And ultimately, it becomes very difficult for anybody to say anything. And it incentivizes candidates to come up with these catchy, 10-second sound bites that will get replayed on cable news over and over, instead of actually, coming up with detailed, thought out explanations of what their policies are. So there is an incentive here for sort of soundbite moments. And on the Republican side, yeah, it's funny. There's this real drive to find anyone who is a Republican who doesn't like Donald Trump, and then they get elevated into being way more important than they actually are. Joe Walsh is someone who I think has expressed even worse views than Donald Trump in terms of bigotry. He said horrible things about Muslims, even worse, I think, than Donald Trump has ever said. But yet he comes in the race. He has no chance at all, but he gets elevated and gets all this airtime. Same with many other Republican commentators who, if they criticize Trump, even if it's on very narrow grounds, they get elevated. So yes, it is a circus. I'm fortunate to not be right in the belly of the beast, but it. On the other hand, I do think there is something positive about having a lot of candidates, because it does mean that there are more chances for a debate of the issues.
No, very much so. Appreciate the chat. We look forward to talking to you very soon. We'll put up all of your links on our Facebook page so people can get in touch with you, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you.